number 2, Ohio State. At number 13, Penn State.
All right, so the Nittany Lions got blown out by Michigan a couple of weeks ago. And I wasn't expecting it. You weren't expecting it. I was really surprised with the way that they played. They gave up over 400 yards rushing to Michigan, and I think Michigan's really good, by the way. But I didn't expect that. I didn't expect them to be totally manhandled at the line of scrimmage like they were in that game. This was the 5th-ranked rushing defense in the country going into that game. They were giving up, less than 90 yards? And here they are just getting run through by Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. That offensive line was doing an amazing job. Well, that didn't get all that better in their next game. So they go, it's the whiteout game, and they're facing Minnesota. And Minnesota ran the ball pretty effectively on them. Now, not like Michigan did, but again, Minnesota's not Michigan. So now all of a sudden, you've got this stark contrast for Penn State in what their first 5 games of the year was defensively stopping the run, and what their last 2 games have been stopping the run. In their first 5 games, they gave up 79 yards per game. Again, one of the best rush defenses in all of college football. Everyone talking about, hey, P.J. Mustipher, their great defensive tackle. The fact that he's back and healthy is really what makes them a good defense. It can let all that length and athleticism around him flourish. And to a large extent, through the first 5 games, that was true. Even going down, beating an Auburn team, about the same exact score that Georgia beat that Auburn team. And they were really good. And then they roll into Michigan and get absolutely thumped. And again, I was shocked that day on how that game played out. It was way more of a blowout than the score indicated. Penn State was not all that close to Michigan. And then last week, they again give up a lot of yards. Now, they beat Minnesota, and I thought that they played well and they played better, but we've still got this stark split. First 5 games, 79 rushing yards given up. Last 2, 291 yards given up per game. So that's going to have to improve. And what's interesting about that, and why I started right there in this game breakdown, is the fact that I have the sense that Ohio State is going to come in with the distinct point of emphasis, if you will, to emphasize the run game. Well, why do you say that? Because Ohio State, for the first time this year, showed a vulnerability last week. And it wasn't just the fact that they settled for field goals on a lot of those short fields, although that is a vulnerability. They didn't run the ball very well. See, coming into this game last week against Iowa for the Buckeyes, this was a rushing attack that was one of the better rushing attacks in all of college football. They were a balanced offense. It's what made them so difficult to defend. And then all of a sudden, they show up and they go 30 attempts for 66 yards. Yikes. That's not very good. Here, let's create an analogy. That was like a really one-sided heavyweight boxing prize fight where we know the outcome, like this guy's going to win, the favored guy's going to win, he's the number one, he's the champ, all this thing. And yet there was a couple of moments where it's like the contender throws an uppercut and it's like, whoa, it's like an eyebrow raise, right? It's like the first time. Did that cut him? Did that cut the champ? Like, we haven't seen that. When you see Tyson's head get thrown backwards by Buster Douglas early in that fight. Now, again, Douglas won that in an upset, so it's not a clean analogy, but you get what I'm saying. It's the first eyebrow raise of the season for Ohio State. It's like, wait, you can stop that running game? So why did I start with Penn State's defense? Because you have to stop Ohio State's rushing attack. And they're going to have to improve from what they have been over the last 2 weeks. They've got to fully commit to stopping that running attack. You might say, well, no, Joel, you allow them to, run the football, and you've got to focus on slowing down their passing attack. But that's not the blueprint for how teams have beat Ohio State. If you look at the blueprint, you go back to last year and you look at what Oregon did and you look at what Michigan did, both of those games played out eerily similar, okay? And one of them is that you make Ohio State one-dimensional by stopping their run and then the style of game in which you put them in because you can run the football, okay? So now we go to the style of game that Penn State has to play in order to win this game even at home. Oregon last year in that ball game and that win over Ohio State had 269 yards running the football, over 7 yards per carry, and 3 touchdowns. They dominated the game, but it wasn't just the domination of the game. It was also controlling the game. They dictated the entire style of the game. So that's number one. Michigan did the exact same thing, 297 yards on the ground, 7.2 yards per carry, and 6 touchdowns. They controlled the game. They dictated the style with which the game was going to be played. What's the next thing that Oregon and Michigan both did? They tackled really well in space. Okay, so they did not allow, whether it's the running backs for Ohio State or those wide receivers, to get the ball into their hands and then create big plays after the catch. Long runs, explosive plays. They tackled them, lined up, made them snap it again. Each of them did this. It takes length and athleticism in the back end to do that. Michigan had it last year. Oregon had it last year. And by the way, Penn State, they do a good job of this. So that's one of the areas that they're going to have to play well. And then the third area that both of those teams had, Oregon and Michigan, they played really great in the red zone. So they were forcing Ohio State at times to settle for field goals rather than score touchdowns. Coming into last week, Ohio State was one of the best, albeit the best, team in the country in terms of converting red zone trips into touchdowns. And then Iowa forced them into field goals. Now, it didn't matter in the end. They still blew their doors off, but you've got to do that if you're going to beat this Ohio State team. And Penn State, by the way, did this really well last year in Columbus against the Buckeyes. In fact, Ohio State last year had 6 trips inside the red zone. They only scored 1 touchdown and kicked 4 field goals. Came up empty on one of their trips. So Penn State's going to have to duplicate that if they want to win this game. It's a very clean blueprint. What did I just lay out for you? Number one, you've got to dominate on the ground. So the Penn State defense cannot allow the Ohio State offense to dictate the tempo and style of the game with their run game. And then in turn, Penn State's going to have to run it really well with their young backs. That's what Oregon did. That's what Michigan did. The length and athleticism at the second and third level for Penn State's defense, guys like Joey Porter, Kalen King, they've got to play great, and in particular in one area, which is tackling in space. When you do that, you limit explosives. You limit the long touchdowns. When you limit the long touchdowns, then Ohio State has to go into the red zone. When they go into the red zone, that's then the third bullet point. You've got to stop them and force them to kick field goals. All right, so that's the blueprint right there. Penn State, maybe they've got it, maybe they don't. I believe it's all in the rushing game because I do think they've got the defensive backs, and I do think that they can play the requisite red zone defense. What I don't know is can they control the game on the ground with their offensive running attack, and can they stop Ohio State's rushing attack, in particular with the way that they've played over the last couple of weeks. Again, I'm calling the game. I'm not going to give a pick. Ohio State favored on the road by 15.5 in Happy Valley. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.